Welcome into the CHGO Blackhawks podcast presented by PointsBet. Use promo code CHGO when you sign up to get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000, but that's not it. If you make a $50 or more first-time deposit, you'll receive a free CHGO membership. That unlocks all of our great web content, and you'll even get a free shirt of your choice from the CHGO locker. That's 2 bets up to $2,000, a free CHGO membership, and a free t-shirt from the CHGO locker, all for making a $50 or more first-time deposit at PointsBet. I'm Jay Zawaski. Got Greg Boysen to my left, and to my other left, Blackhawks analyst Colby Cohen has joined us in studio. Colby, thanks for coming by, man. It's good to see you.
It's good to be here. I've heard a lot about this place. It's been a lot of buzz about you guys, and it's cool to come check out the digs. I was just complimenting you guys on the aesthetic before we got going, so not a terrible place to spend a couple hours.
No, it is a cool place for sure.
Fun thing about this view, I noticed like literally 3 weeks ago, the NHL Network all of a sudden now has a set where everybody's kind of just sitting in comfy chairs or the brick behind it. I was like, that looks familiar.
You're stealing our bit.
Well, they've been experimenting for sure, and what's interesting is like sometimes the guys will be like, one guy will be like super casual and dress like, you know, like Scotty Hartnell will come in like super casual, and then EJ will be like trying to be casual, but like he's too old school, and he's still got like
one open shirt color
with like the gold buttons on it, and you're like, you should probably do the suit thing. It's just the casual thing's probably never going to work for you.
Yeah, the day I walk in here and people are in ties, I'm going to be worried that I'm in the wrong office.
Yeah, that's
I wouldn't do well.
I've been able to avoid that throughout my career, fortunately. I'm not a suit guy because I have no neck. And not having a neck is not a good feature with a suit. Speaking of broadcast experimenting, it's a good place for us to lead off with you. It's been an interesting year in your seat and in Chris's seat and Kaylee's seat, with you guys sort of rotating all sorts of roles and everything. I think Hawks fans are getting to know you and Chris and Kaylee a little bit more. What was it like this year, kind of with the rotating roles of sometimes you're between the bench, sometimes you're on radio, sometimes TV? What was it like for you to kind of navigate that as the season went on?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're learning a new team, you're learning a new organization, you know, obviously building chemistry with people is really helpful and really useful. And I think that was probably one of the challenges this year, was kind of never really doing the same thing 3 games in a row or something like that. Yeah. But, you know, for me, I think that I've kind of prided myself in being able to kind of fill in and do whatever I need to do. And, you know, I've done a lot of studio work for the Flyers for a couple of years. I've done a lot of game between the bench work for ESPN for the last couple of years, doing all the college stuff. So, you know, radio, this is actually the first year that I'm not doing playoff hockey on the radio. Usually I do it for Westwood One. They don't actually have the rights anymore. It's a totally different group. I don't even know what it's called. So this is the first year. Normally I'd be kind of bouncing around doing radio games in the playoffs, which is a lot of fun because I get to work with, you know, Kenny Albert and Sam Rosen and, you know, Dave, just like all these kind of legendary play-by-play guys. I mean, Sam Rosen has obviously been around forever. Yeah. So I like, you know, feel fortunate, I think, that I get to do so many different things. You know, and get to move around the broadcasts as much as I have. But it definitely makes things a little bit challenging at times, for sure, too, because, you know, you kind of get used to people's cadence, the way that they talk, and you get used to when they come in and out of things, and that kind of helps you improve the show and build on chemistry on the broadcast, which ultimately is what we're looking to do, and give the fans at home a good listen and you know, something that they can, you know, cling on to while they're watching the games.
You mentioned chemistry, and it seemed that you and Chris Foster, who we had here a couple weeks ago, you guys have formed real good chemistry real quick. When you guys are together in the booth, you could tell you guys play well off each other. How did that come about? Did you guys know each other beforehand, or was it just you guys clicked right away?
You know what? I think we definitely clicked right away. I think Chris is, a really smart, intellectual guy, and, just getting to know him on the road. I mean, it's really no different than when a coach talks about going on a road trip to bond and spend time with people. And so, we did some road trips early on. They weren't super long road trips, but we got out on the road together. And when you're on the road, you're eating 3 meals a day together. You're preparing together, your pregame skates together. So it kind of gives you the opportunity to really get to know somebody, not just in the booth. And, I think what's great with Chris is, he just doesn't take himself too seriously. And I think a lot of the gentlemen, or a lot of the people that work in those roles, they're very serious. And, I think Chris just has this light way about himself that sort of made it easy for him and I to kind of rag on each other and have a good time together and really try not to be anything more than entertaining. I think that's like a big key and something him and I are always talking about. Like, we have to try to be entertaining. Yes, we have a job to do. We have to talk about the game. We have to make sure that we're pointing things out that people may have missed, may not have seen, but we also have to be entertaining. We also want to connect with people. We also want to be available to people. And so, our chemistry and our relationship just really kind of built off the ice, and I say off the ice like I'm still playing, but you guys get get what I mean. So and really, him and I have become good friends. I mean, we've been spending a lot of time together since the playoffs started, watching games, and he's such a student of the game. I mean, he wants to learn and understand why things are and happen the way they do in the NHL. So he's come over. We've watched 4 and 5 games, in a night, and you're just talking about the games. Last night, even we were texting about, what's going on in the LA Edmonton series. Why, just different things. And I'm always really impressed with how he is able to pick things up pretty quickly and then sort of apply that to his questions. So just an easy guy to be friends with. You guys met him and you saw who he is.
Right.
I think that's the cool thing. What you get on the air with Chris is who Chris is off the air. A lot of guys are different on the air than they are off the air, or their personality changes, and that's just not who he is. He is what you get. And so it's really been easy to form that bond and relationship with him.
Yeah, the chemistry and also, like, you talk about being entertaining, and that's always a big challenge because there's a certain group of people that just want to hear the action call. There's another group of people that's like, hey, it's 6-1 one way or the other. I don't need every detail of the play. Like, finding that fine line is great. And I always think back to when I think of great moments I remember in broadcasting, be it from a game or a sports radio show or whatever, very rarely is it about the game itself or the analysis itself. It's about those funny moments that happen between the people who are talking that maybe have nothing to do with the game itself. Like we heard so many times when Pat Foley retired, the Dale Talon, the weenie comment he made, that has lived for 25 years. People will always laugh and joke about that. And that, I think that is, for those that don't work in broadcasting like we do, establishing chemistry is sometimes the hardest thing to do. And it seems like right away, not just the two of you, but just the games that we've covered, you have seen the chemistry with Kaylee and Chris and you and Joe Brand and the young people who are now the faces of the Blackhawks broadcast have really seemed to hit it off and they get along well, that bodes great for the audience as this chemistry grows.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned Joe Brand, another guy, like salt of the earth type of guy. I mean, and I think the Blackhawks have put a major focus on finding good people and finding people who want to be part of a team because let's face it, it's going to be uphill in a lot of ways right now. Yeah. I think we all know that. And so finding those key pillars of people who are going to ride and who are going to remain optimistic and who are going to understand that like we're all a small part of something bigger. We aren't, you don't turn on a game to watch the broadcaster. You turn on a game to watch the game, and the broadcaster's job is to entertain you and talk you through it. But you are a small part of a way bigger thing and a way bigger event. And, for people who don't think that who work in my field, well, they're wrong, because the game is the show. The players, the game, the on-ice product. And so our job is to supplement as best as we can, and finding people that are willing to see that, willing to do that, people who are willing to check their egos at the door and be part of something, guys filling in, girls, guys, whomever. Kaylee's here one day, they're the next. Joe Brand's jumping in to do stuff for the scoreboard and the in arena while hosting our radio shows and doing a great job. And then one day he gets a call and he's doing a baseball game for the White Sox. So a lot of it is just about finding the right people who want to be part of a team and who are willing to, really just understand sort of where they fall in the bigger picture.
We got an interesting question here in our chat. You were talking about...
oh, no, there's chat. There's notes.
It's all live, man.
Oh, this should be fun.
We didn't tell you this ahead of time because we didn't want to scare you off. No, but you talked about watching a lot of the playoffs with Chris. Of course, we're all tuning in. No Blackhawks, so we got to figure out who to cheer for. So who are you rooting for here? I mean, I know you got Philly roots, but you got Boston connection. Are you allowed to root for the Bruins as a Philly guy?
So here's the thing. People, I did grow up a Flyers fan, like any other kid where I'm from. I had a very close connection to the Flyers as a kid. My mom was very close with the Snyder family. They grew up on the same street. My mom and Craig Snyder were high school and college sweethearts. My mom was drinking from the cup in the 70s in the locker room when they won, because her and Craig Snyder, were they were dating. They were together. They were engaged to be married. They didn't get married. She married my father instead. That's a whole nother story. I'm like, Mom, what were you thinking? But my road to the NHL would have been a lot easier.
Yeah, could have been Snyder.
So I did grow up a Flyers fan, but what happens, you kind of grow apart as you start to get closer to being a professional. And when I got drafted, and that changed. Like, part of that childhood fandom sort of dies within you when they skip you or they don't draft you or you go to another team, and that's where you pledge your allegiance to. And so, I'm watching the playoffs right now, and for me, it's a lot more individual rather than a team. Like, I certainly root to see certain individuals do well, guys that I'm tight with, guys that I've either watched. I think back to when Charlie McAvoy and Matt Grzelcyk came on their visits to BU when I was playing at BU, and we were the ones taking them out and about in Boston to show them a good time. And those were young kids at the time, and they were NTDP kids coming in the same sort of pathway that I did. So I root for those guys to do well. And, I look at Colorado. There's a lot of great people there. I have a good bond with Joe Sakic from when I played there. And, I root for him, and I want to see his team do well. I played with Adam Foote. So when I look at Cal Foote on the ice, it's hard for me to not be a human being and root for his son to do well. And so... a lot of the, I would say whatever horse I would have in the race of the playoffs has to, do more with, personal, I root for Claude Giroux. He's a good guy. I was with him in Philadelphia working. We were friends off the ice. We skated and trained together in summer times. I'd like to see a guy like him succeed because he's a good person, and I would like to see him have an opportunity to win. So I'm rooting for good games, and I'm rooting for guys who I'm friendly with mostly, and rather than if one team wins or the other, that I don't really care about.
No, I get that. As I've spent more time behind the curtain, your fandom goes away a little bit because you realize that every organization has good people easier to cheer for.
Totally.
And I get that. I'm rooting for good games, and it's amazing how much more enjoyable those overtime games are when you don't have a team you're cheering for.
I mean, it's
you don't
so
have
much easier.
9 heart attacks in an hour and a half.
It really it matters. And you guys obviously have a more inside look behind the curtain. You guys get to know players. You guys are talking to players, and so it gives you the opportunity to see the human side of it. I brought this up on one of our last broadcasts of the year when I talked about how much that I personally root for Dylan Strome to do well, because I've just seen what he's gone through this year as a person, what he's battled through. Then he loses his dog at the end of the year, which was brutal. A very close personal thing for me as well. And because I'm a huge dog person, huge golden retriever person. And so, like, I'm not afraid to say that on the air because this is a good human. I'm always going to root for a guy to do well who's a good person, whether it's in Chicago, whether it's in Edmonton, whatever. I'm going to root for guys who are good human beings because at the end of the day, these are the best hockey players in the world. They are. There's varying degrees of being the best. There's not a bad player in the NHL. People have gotten really comfortable calling. It happened today in Sheldon Keefe's press conference. Why would you play the worst defenseman on your team? Sheldon Keefe said, who's the worst defenseman on my team? Well, like that's a bold question to state about a player in the NHL and the NHL playoffs. And so, you root for the human side of these things. And you remember when you guys have the positions that you have, when I have the position that I have, these are humans.
Yeah. Well, it leads us nicely into some of the hockey conversation. And Dylan Strome has been a guy who's specifically been on our mind as the offseason approaches here. He went through, as you know, the year full of trade rumors and then the firing of Jeremy Colliton, the promotion of Derek King, and then his sort of ascent there. And as you listen to Kyle Davidson speak in the offseason, he hasn't really said yes or no if Dylan's going to be back or not, but when he describes what he's looking for, it doesn't necessarily sound like he's describing Dylan Strome. I think we're on record as saying we would like him back. What do you think the future holds for Strome in Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a good question. And, Kyle, I haven't really had an opportunity to talk to Kyle about some of these things yet. I'm sure at some point I'll run into him at the UC, and Kyle's a pretty forthcoming guy, and he's been really great for us to work with as far as how honest he is with us and how much he trusts us and kind of brings us in and explains why we're doing what we're doing, which I think is very unique. That doesn't normally happen. Yeah. But look, from a personal standpoint, I'd love to see Dylan Strome here. He's an awesome guy. I love dealing with him on the professional side. I like him on the personal side. I root for people who you look what he overcame this year. So many guys would have put their tail between their legs and their season would have been over. And for him to, have the character to be a good guy and go through it and then come on the other side, he's going to be in good shape no matter where he goes. I'd love to see him continue to be here. Contractually, they got things they got to work out. Obviously being a restricted free agent, Kyle's got management, assets to manage.
Right.
He's got contracts he needs to look at. So, I'm sure there's a bigger picture strategy that Kyle has in mind when it comes to some of these RFAs and where they might fit. Maybe he lets some guys test the open market and then he brings them back. It's really going to depend. I'd love to see him back here just like you guys. There's a reason he got nominated for the award that he did. I did a one-on-one podcast with him this year, and for me, it was the best podcast that I was a part of for the Blackhawks this year. He's just a smart guy who is willing to have a conversation and talk about other things and show you the more human side of it. So easy guy for me to root for and want to see have success.
So do you think, I know maybe you're not like bros with him or whatever, but do you get the impression he wants to be
Absolutely.
here? Yeah. Because again, like going through trade rumors and everything, and I wonder how much you credit Derek King jumping in and sort of, I wouldn't say taking him under his wing, but definitely showing some attention. And I think being specific with Dylan about what he needed to change to stay in the lineup every night.
Yeah, I think Derek did an unbelievable job the way he managed that situation. And, look, it's funny because Derek has this personality of this happy-go-lucky guy, and he is. But the one thing that I just appreciate about him is he will take every bullet for his players, every day. And I think there were times this year where he was probably harder on guys than we all were able to see. I get to be between the benches during games, so I get to see things in real time and live. And, Derek holds people accountable like any other head coach does. He will also always protect his players. That is his style. He was a player. He remembers what it's like to be a player. Not every coach, not every GM, I don't think can say the same thing. So I give Derek a lot of credit. I think he treated Dylan like an adult. I think they had some hard conversations early on, and I think that he said, work with me and I will work with you. I'm not asking you to do things I haven't done. I have also been in these situations as a player. There's a relatability there. And I give them both an equal amount of credit for what they were able to pull out and salvage and then some. You can't just say he salvaged his season. He had a really good season.
Yeah.
All things considered, we didn't score a lot of points, a lot of goals this year. He figured in on a lot of them. So, it's one of those situations where two guys that were being straight with each other, and not BSing each other, were able to get the best out of one another and, find a way to make something positive that, as you guys know, was not positive.
Yeah,
right.
No, definitely, Dylan was a consummate professional the whole year. He could have easily put on a pouty face and gone to one of us and said, hey, I want to get the hell out of here, and never did, never griped.
It's unbelievable.
It's
I
admirable.
put
how he
myself
handled
in that situation, and I would not have been able to be half the pro that he was in that situation.
Look, you're one of the best 5 or 6 players on a roster, and you can't get in, and you're on the 4th line. It's like, come on. Like, what are we doing here? It's got to be... You're right.
And again, not to, this is not me defending Jeremy Colleton, but, this is a business where you could see something and I could see something, the same 4-second clip, and we see it completely different. And these coaches have a vision for what they want, and they're stubborn, a lot of them. And they see certain fits, and to them it's right. And there really isn't always a right or wrong answer. That's why players get picked up on waivers and then they go do well on one team, or that's why you trade a guy and then he scores 25 or 30 goals somewhere else. It's not necessarily always about the best player, but the best fit. And I think that that's something that gets overlooked in all of our sport.
Yeah.
Not just here in Chicago. It's who's the right fit for different situations. One coach might be the right fit for a situation. That's a hot topic right now. One coach wouldn't be the right fit, even though they may be the best coach, right? So it really is so situational dependent. And again, you just got to give those guys credit for figuring it out.
I look at somebody like Anthony Duclair is that example, who bounced around, couldn't really. Then he gets to Florida, where he's probably lower on the depth chart than he was in other cities, and it just clicks for him.
You say the same thing about Ryan Hartman in Minnesota.
Yeah, absolutely.
How many teams did it take? And I know everybody wants to beat up the Hawks right now. We had Ryan Hartman, sure.
Nobody shed a tear the day
exactly.
He got traded.
And he was in Philly when I was in Philly, and people were like, what?
Yeah.
Wait. Keith Jones is such a good example, and I remember this from my childhood. He was in Colorado on the 4th line.
Yep.
He comes to Philadelphia. He plays on a line with Lindros and LeClaire, and he becomes Jonesy. And he becomes a guy that people now know, and he parlayed it into an incredible broadcasting career because Roger Nielsen, I think it was Roger Nielsen was the coach at the time, saw him as a fit for that line. And in Colorado, I think it was who would have been the coach? It might have been Mark Crawford. It might have been there was a French guy who was there. I can't remember his name for a while, but when they were really good in the late 90s or in the early 2000s or whatever, but they had him on the 4th line and as a healthy scratch. So it's so situationally dependent. So
hey, the best way to support CHGO is to download the PointsBet app and use code CHGO when you sign up. If you do that right now, you'll get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000, but that's not it. Make a $50 or more first-time deposit and you'll receive a free CHGO membership, which unlocks all of our web content, and you'll even get a free shirt of your choice from the CHGO locker. That's $2,000 in free bets, a free CHGO membership, and a free t-shirt from the CHGO locker, all for making a $50 or more first-time deposit at PointsBet. They're your home for live in-play betting, and it just got even better. Introducing PointsBet's new feature, Live NBA Same Game Parlay. For the first time ever, you can build the perfect live NBA Same Game Parlay only with PointsBet. Want more? You can also boost your live same-game parlays. Watch live, parlay live, and boost live with PointsBet. And remember, online sign-up is available now in Illinois, so start to finish from your phone, you can sign up with PointsBet. So what are you waiting for? Once the game starts, don't just bet. Live your bet life with PointsBet. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. I want to get back to a little bit of your part of things. I saw you bristle a little bit when we mentioned the chat. We live in a day and age where you're expected to be on social media. We're expected to be on social media. It's kind of part of the gig. How do you deal with the real-time feedback that you get in-game, after the game. People are very bold.
There really is no feedback. That's the thing, is there's very little feedback. First of all, I don't see anything in-game.
Good move.
Early in the year, I would try to look in-game to interact with people, and that was kind of my whole goal when I came here, was to interact with everybody and really try to, hey, if you have a question during the game, I'll answer it if I can. Mm-hmm. But when I start getting death threats,
oh my God,
it just becomes, hey, look, I'm just not going to look. I'm not going to check. I haven't gone on Twitter since the Florida trip. I just was like, if you want to talk to me about something and you want to ask me a question, like, I'll always answer. I'll never look at a question as a stupid question ever, because people want to learn and understand. And the reality is most people have no idea what's going on behind the scenes of a broadcast, voices in your ear, people telling you things. I mean, at one point someone was like, it's really annoying that you copy Eddie Olczyk's promos. It's like, well, geez.
You mean the ad copy?
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
It's like, well, that just shows the lack of understanding for what we do, because like somebody hands you a card, you read it, and you move on.
Pause for the Taco Bell bell.
Exactly. Like those are things that the marketing department and the sales department come up with. We have nothing to do with that stuff. So the first and the early part of the year, I wanted to make a point to make myself available. I thought that was really important, being a new person in a market where people don't know who I am. But the minute I started getting the death threats from people,
so
I was just like, you know what? I mean, like, look, I kind of laugh at most of it. I really do. But my wife doesn't think it's funny.
Right.
And so my mom, my wife, I mean, like, they see these kinds of things. So I've just stopped going on, and I've stopped, interacting with anybody. I've turned, messaging and stuff like that off, because, again, like, it's all in good fun at times. Like, even being critical or even being sarcastic, like, it's funny. Like, I can laugh at most of it. But the minute you cross the line and you make a death threat, or you say you want to take a gun, it's just that then it becomes, all right, look, I'm not going to subject myself to that.
Oh,
so
good for you.
So there really is no actual feedback. The feedback that I get is from NBC. The feedback that I get is from our, broadcast department at the Blackhawks. The feedback that I get comes sometimes from the top of the organization, from our ownership, from our CEO, from our president, even from our GM. And it's not always feedback. It's more collaboration and partnership. And, look, and when I do the NCAA tournament and I have good producers there, and I work with good people that have done TV forever, I have friends, I have, different people you can lean on and ask for advice, and, how can I do this better? And you watch film, and, so that's where I will get, feedback and this and that, because the reality is social media is there's no feedback on social media.
It's toxic as hell. And like, we sort of learned our first weeks, people just don't like change, regardless of what the change is. If it's for the better, whatever, it's just change, and people hate it. And I had people, you were a guest on the old Madhouse podcast, which is what this turned into. And people are like, you're doing the show too often, I can't keep up with it. It's like, well, I'm sorry. We're doing 5 shows a week instead of 2. You'd think you'd be happy about that, but you're right. The feedback is almost not all negative, but you're right.
Okay,
it's not feedback.
Critical feedback is helpful.
Like, hey, I'd appreciate more insight on the system versus
that stuff is really actually because at the end of the day, you really do want to make the people at home. You want them to enjoy it. So like that type of stuff is great. But it's just so far and few between that you kind of have to have like a one-size-fits-all approach to these kinds of things. It's just, you guys are seeing it based on, what you guys are doing. And again, it's part of, it's the new town hall. I mean, it's like we want to bring people to the town hall and put them on trial in the town hall in the town square. I mean,
Right.
it's
an unfortunate part of being in this business. There's a very fine line between constructive criticism and busting someone's chops, and then just being a flat out jerk.
busting someone's chops is sometimes needed,
Well, yeah.
welcomed. I mean, it's good for any of us.
I think I got to this chair by busting.
Yeah,
so I'm all for it.
yeah.
It didn't hurt.
But when you start getting personal, and you start the personal attacks, that's where it's.
And here's the other thing too: is like be informed and understand what you're even criticizing, because the amount of people that are talking about not even realizing, like, I hope you don't get Pat Foley's job. I mean, that was the most consistent thing that I heard this year was, I'm praying you don't get Pat Foley's job. And I'm like, well,
I
your
never tried for
prayers
it,
are
so-
coming true.
I'm not a
Because
play-by-play guy.
I literally couldn't, if I wanted to, be a play-by-play person. And I'm like, well, geez, your lack of... Are you just yelling to yell?
Pretty much,
You know what I
yes.
mean? And so
That's why Al Gore
I
invented
would
the
say,
internet.
like, if you really want to talk to me about something and approach me about something, there's a great way to do it. And it's just to, like, act like a normal person and, like, just
And
you know,
act like
Yeah,
a
exactly,
normal
Well,
right?
you said it earlier about the human element when it comes to players. We're talking about Dylan Strome, and there's a human element to the people that cover the game too. That people just think it's just a Twitter account I could yell at. Well, there's a human being behind that, and I think that was part of the reason we were excited to get both you and Chris in here, because you guys have been thrown in a tough situation. You mentioned Pat and Edzo, two beloved, longtime guys here. And, of course, you're going to get a lot of the knee-jerk reactions. You're here to take their jobs. Well, that's not how this is going at all.
not
You're
even
not
a
these
little bit.
evil guys from Castle Grayskull looking to plot and take
That'd be cool,
overthrow
though.
the regime. So that's why we thought it was important to get you guys here so the fans could see the human aspect of the people who cover the game as well as playing, because that's important too. And kind of building off of that is, like, you did get to spend a season with Pat Foley, with Eddie Olczyk. I mean, these guys are as good as it gets when it comes to hockey, covering the sport of hockey. So what kind of things were you able to take, just either just watching those guys or having conversation with those? Because I know those are two guys that love to take the next generation under their wing and kind of say, hey, let's go have a beer and talk shop. So how was it working with those guys?
Well, the thing that I think was cool for me this year was the games that I got to physically do with Eddie. We've all watched Eddie do this for a long time. We've all watched Eddie become the best at this for a long time. And, for me, getting to do games with him was what I kind of was most looking forward to when I came here, because it's a challenge. And in the way that a player gets challenged when they get put on Patrick Kane's line, because you better bring it. And you better have something interesting to say. And you better find something so different and minute, because he's going to find most things. So you better find a way to add, and you better find a way to see things that he maybe missed, but which isn't much. He's great at seeing everything happen in real time and let it run through his brain and watching how he kind of gets in and out of those things. So, look, I can say it was a little bit of a strange year in the fact that, like, Eddie and I weren't really on the road together. Pat and I weren't really on the road together. If you guys noticed, I really didn't work much with Pat this year. When Pat was doing games, it was usually other people in there doing it with him. We did Fleury's 500th game together, which was so cool just to be there for Flowers' 500th win, not game. But other than that, we really didn't do games together. So, we didn't really get to spend that kind of time on the road, having beers and doing that kind of stuff. But, Eddie was when I first got hired, we had a couple of really good conversations. I known Eddie, go back to when I was probably like 15, because he had Eddie Jr. is the same age as me, and played at UMass. I played at BU. Like, there was, we were at the U.S. festival camps together when we were 14 and 15 years old, and Eddie was there watching his son, even would coach sometimes the team that they would take overseas, the select team of players that weren't the NTDP guys, they would sort of take the next group. And so, like, Eddie was around, and so kind of got to know him there. And, it was definitely, like I said, like, getting to work with him is really the best lesson for me, because it's a challenge in a good way, because it forces you to be really on top of things, and it forces you to be like so mentally dialed in during a game, because again, he catches almost everything. Like, he could be looking at his telestrator, but somehow out of the other corner of his eye, he saw a puck get deflected. You know, he's got a great eye for this. He's obviously got the coach's brain, so he's looking at it probably more as a coach than as a player. I mean, look, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I feel like he very much has that coach's brain on him. When you hear him talk about the broadcast, when you hear him, for me, I'm thinking more of it from like the player brain. Just because like I've never coached or ever wanted to coach or ever, you know, been in those types of roles. So I think just the actually getting to work with them was probably the part that helps the development the most. And I think it'll probably be a pretty regular thing next season to be working with Eddie, you know, with him being in the booth and me being down between the glass. So, you know, I think that will be another opportunity for me to continue to get better in that role. But the other thing too, like with his TNT schedule this year, you know, they did all those late night West Coast games in the beginning of the season. So again, like his travel schedule was kind of clunky because he would have to leave on a Tuesday morning. So we would kind of lose him for a Tuesday and a Wednesday and a Thursday. So like we just didn't really get the opportunity to do the like, you know, and then COVID, we weren't even allowed to leave the hotels and stuff like that. So I kind of wish we would have had more opportunity this year to do that kind of stuff. But, you know, luckily, like, you know, next year will probably be different. Hopefully we're not dealing with COVID restrictions. Yeah, seriously. So we'll get to spend more time together, you know, on the road and, you know, being able to have those moments where I get to pick his brain or ask him, hey, like, what do you think of this player from like your point of view? And because again, he has the coach's brain. And I think that, you know, that's a different lens than I can look at things through.
What's your favorite role? Is it the between the bench role? Is that your favorite?
It's hands down where I like to be. I mean, I've always liked it. I felt kind of early on like this is my favorite spot. Like I'm happy and like the most energy and dialed in when I'm down in that role. You know, even if it was a 2-person booth, like if Eddie's away and I would still probably next year request if I could be downstairs, because it's just there's just something about the energy of being down there. And I think that it just gives you, it constantly reminds you and gives you an appreciation for just how hard it is on the ice. Because in the press box, in the 200 levels, things look slow. There's a lot of room out on the ice. If you guys have ever sat on the glass for a Hawks game or any NHL game, you know there's no room on the ice. None whatsoever. So it just is it's my favorite thing. I mean, I like it hands down the most.
It just goes to show that you need a competitive edge in the broadcast booth as well as on the ice. And if you want to start your day with a competitive edge, Strava CBD coffee is a game changer and has helped thousands of people, including 2 right here, improve their overall wellness and quality of life. Strava delivers delicious, fresh, roasted specialty coffee infused with organic, broad-spectrum CBD. CBD from hemp doesn't make you feel high or hungry, but it does offer you plenty of benefits that can help you, like feeling alert and focused without the jitters. Live your day more balanced with less anxiety and fewer aches and pains. And who the hell doesn't want less of that? Plus, including CBD with your daily routine can even help you enjoy a more restful sleep so you wake up feeling your best. And the best part is not only you're getting all those benefits from CBD, but you're getting fresh, delicious, small batch coffee shipped directly straight to your door. And CHGO listeners can save up to 25% off their entire purchase when you use the code CHGO25 at checkout. That's 25% off your entire order at StravaCraftCoffee.com when you use the CHGO25 code at checkout. And if you already love Strava, and you should by now, you can subscribe and save by joining the Strava Craft Coffee Club. That's where they put you in control. You can order all the flavors you love and have them shipped to your home or office on your schedule. It doesn't get any easier than that.
Had Strava on the way down today. Fantastic.
It is.
I feel like I'm having a good show. I give it all to the coffee. And hey, it's Monday on the CHGO Blackhawks podcast. That means we're with our buddy Kent Simpson of the Simpson Law Group. After over a decade of prosecuting homicide cases as an assistant Cook County State's attorney, he opened his own firm over 20 years ago, specializing in all forms of personal injury cases. If someone's negligence has you injured, out of work, whatever, if someone's been harmed in a nursing home, anything like that, a slip and fall case, Kent is your man. His firm's results speak for themselves, with millions recovered for their clients, and the Simpson Law Group charges no fees unless they win for you. So call now for a free consultation, 312-332-2107. Don't go off sides, go top shelf. Call now, 312-332-2107, or visit simpsonlawgroup.com. That's SINSON. All right, Colby, as we approach the offseason here, well, the offseason's underway for the Blackhawks. We're all really thinking about what's next. What's the next thing in this rebuild? What's the team going to look like for the next 2, 3, 5 years? And two guys at the top of that list are Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane. And, you know, we saw both of them, probably more Toews than Kane, show a little frustration with the process of losing night after night and going through a rebuild. Where do you see their futures with the organization? Do you see them back next year? And do you think you could see them, you know, if Kyle, and he has flat out said it's not my job to sell them on a rebuild, but if he can sort of convince them that, hey, we would like you to be part of this, do you see those two settling into a kind of mentoring role?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I really do. And I think that that's a really good point. I'm kind of glad you said that, is because you're right. It's not Kyle's job to convince them to stay around. I think what Kyle has to do and do really well is communicate with them and explain to them clearly what expectations are, because you've got two guys that are, you know, living legends in this city and in the sport. Yeah. I mean, these are two Hall of Fame players. They're obviously at different stages of their career. They bring different things within the dressing room. And I do think that, you know, there is a place for winners and guys who have, you know, played hundreds of playoff games and worn letters on their sweaters, and they've played with guys from multiple generations. I think that's a really important thing, because I think you need players who touched, you know, that last generation of players, the guys who, you know, Patrick Sharps and Seabrook and Adam Foots and Joe Sakic, like the guys who maybe when Kane and even me, or, you know, we're all the 2007 draft, and I think Toews would have been the 2006 draft, I believe, right? So when those guys first came into the league, they were at the end of Foot, Sakic, you know, I'm thinking of maybe who would have been in Philadelphia, you know, guys, you know the players, yeah. Right? And so it's important to have players on your team during a rebuild who have touched multiple generations, because I think you can take from the older generation a little bit, you can take from the younger generation a little bit, and you can kind of find, what do we need to do now to make this work? How do we build the right foundation to sustain success here in Chicago? So Patrick Kane had 95 points this year. Yeah. So you score 90 plus points, there's a spot for you on any team. I think that for him, it's what do you want? You know, I think he and Johnny both have probably earned the right to be partners in what their futures are. And, you know, again, I'm not privy to those conversations, and I know Kyle had some initial conversations with those guys, and I think they're going to have more conversations, and there's buzz and chatter about what those conversations have been like. I'm not going to speculate, because honestly, at some point, I'll just ask. I'll ask Kaner. I'll run into those guys and we'll have a conversation. But you know, I do think that if you want to build a winning team and you can, you know, get those guys rowing the boat, then yeah, I think you're crazy not to have those guys around. But that's an if. That's an if they want to be a part of it, and if they're okay with, like, you know, you're never going to try to lose. I know, you know, everybody has it, oh, well, they're going to tank for the 1 overall and blah, blah, blah. Like, nobody in their right mind in this sport, it's too blue-collar of a sport, is tanking. Guys are way too proud. I don't care if you're on the Devils or if you're on the Avalanche. Players are too proud. You know, I know players on the worst team in the league and the best. They're too proud. Nobody is going to go out there and mail it in because they're thinking about the 1st overall draft pick as a player. Right. Nobody. I mean, it's just too proud of a group of athletes. So I think it'll just be really interesting to see, like, as the summer goes on and as players start to maybe get re-signed or don't get qualified or whatever the case may be, how does that change, the way that Kaner and Toews are looking at this situation. But as far as I'm concerned, if you can have those guys in your dressing room, for the future, whether it's at, a less of a cap hit, whether it's year to year, whatever it may be, I can find a lot more good than bad having those guys around from somebody who's been around players that are, legends of the sport and what they can mean. I mean, Adam Foote in his last year in the NHL, which was my rookie year, and I think about the last trip of preseason, they basically sent most of the players home to the American League, and they had like 8 defense and 14 or 15 forwards, and it was a team trip to Vegas. In Vegas, we played the LA Kings in Vegas. This was before the Vegas Golden Knights at the MGM. They put like a little rink there, makeshift. And then it was 3 days in Vegas as a team to bond. And I roomed with Foote. And Foote didn't normally have a roommate, but I was 20 or 21. And he was like, it's my, now I'm going to pay it forward. And,
cool.
That stuff goes a long way. Like, I will forever carry a flag that says Adam Foote is an unreal guy. Forget him on the ice, but he's just a great guy. The way he treats people, the way he treated me, the way he treated the other young players on our team. So, there are things that I saw him do, say, treat people, treat other people, treat staff. I still carry with me today. So I think that if you can get those guys to buy into what's going on, I very much see a place where they are impactful people to have around the organization. And they still have another year on their contracts.
Right.
So we're talking about incredibly hypothetical things right now, and I know a lot can change quick. You guys have been in this game. You've seen it. But for now, they're Blackhawks.
Yep. Yeah, the Kane and Toews is just one of dozens and dozens of things on Kyle Davidson's plate this summer as he looks to take the first steps of the rebuild. And I've noticed since he's been here, he definitely is confident, but he's also willing to learn. He knows he's not going to be able to do it himself. He's surrounding himself, building a very smart team. He's also not afraid to make unpopular decisions. People didn't love the Brandon Hagel trade because he's such a beloved player, but he said, man, I'm not going to get a return like this ever again.
Ever.
I am pulling the trigger, and I love the move. I hate losing a player like Brendan Hagel, but when you see you struck when the iron was hot, you got him when the value was never going to be higher.
Never.
Thought it was a great move. So we're learning about his style. I think we'll learn more after the draft, but we're kind of figuring out the kind of player he likes. What's the biggest takeaway you've made of Kyle Davidson and what we can maybe expect going forward? So
he's incredibly collaborative, which is really rare and unique. And it's probably more the way of the future in sports. You can see how collaborative he is. He goes out and he hands 2 guys associate GM titles that generally, do teams usually carry associate GMs? No, they don't. And he, in my opinion, did that because he wanted to signify that this is my brain trust. And you look at Norm McIver, who has had so much experience in so many different places, coaching, scouting, managing, playing, old school, new school. I mean, this guy has touched so many different walks of the sport. And then he goes out and hires Jeff Greenberg, who, again, everybody was kind of like, huh? And then you start talking to people and you start learning about what he's going to do. And you're like, okay, so what Kyle did was he went out and found a guy who was a brilliant sports-minded person and said, this guy can make our organization better. I have a plan. Now, how that manifests itself, does that change? Does he lean in more here where we didn't think he was going to lean in, less here? So, I like his collaboration. And from kind of talking to people within the organization and talking directly to Kyle, I think that that's something that he's going to continue to do. He's not going to sit there and say, I don't care if my whole scouting department thinks it's this. I want that because I've seen him 1 or 2 times. Kyle's going to hire good people and then let them do their jobs. And I think that that's kind of a new, I don't want to say it's a new theme in the organization because I was not here under the old regime or group. But, that's a big Danny and Jamie thing, in my opinion. They want to hire good people and then let them do their jobs and be collaborative. And I've had so many conversations with Danny and Jamie throughout the season where they were asking me questions because they were things that were either broadcast related or hockey related. They weren't screaming and yelling, why this, why that. It was, let me understand this. Can you explain this to me? And I think Kyle has a lot of that in him. I really do. I think he's, knows what he doesn't know. And I just think that that's so rare for a coach or a GM. And I think Derek King was like that. Derek knew what his strengths were. He knew what his weaknesses were. He was honest and open about that. Most of the time, these high-level guys in hockey know everything. Just ask them. They'll tell you.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think bringing in this group of individuals that are collaborating together and they're really working at this stuff together, not, oh, hey, Norm, I just traded away Brandon Hagel for 2 first-round picks. I would be willing to bet those two had a lot of conversations, or whoever, head of player personnel, our scouts who watch Tampa Bay, our pro scouts, who do we like there? Do we like these players? These are conversations that I have a lot of faith and trust that Kyle is having, and I just don't think that happens in every organization. I think a lot of times you get people at the top that, are running a little more of a dictatorship and a little less of a democracy or a republic, whatever sure. However you want to refer to it. And so that's what I've noticed most, to answer your question, Greg, is he's not afraid to take advice and have conversations. And I just think that that's probably going to serve him in the long run. And help him build out a really great team. I mean, the best sports organizations in the world are not just run by one person. They are run by a team of people on the business and the hockey or sports side that know how to work together and really kind of kick ass in all their different departments. And like any sports team, the three of us are on a line and we all have a different strength. We're probably going to have we'll have a good line. Right? Because we all can do something a little bit different, but if you're trying to do my job and I'm trying to do your job, we're just running into each other out on the ice and we're just going to end up duplicating, wasting time, wasting energy, and probably at the end of the day, not getting it done.
Well, I've been really impressed with Kyle Davidson's seeming long view on this rebuild. He's not just thinking a month ahead or a year ahead. He's really looking 5 years down the road. But some big news in hockey today that could affect that. Barry Trotz fired by the Islanders, one of the most respected coaches in the league.
Speaking of dictatorships.
And we've, of course, all day we've been taking calls from, tweets and stuff from people saying, the Hawks should hire Barry Trotz. What are your thoughts on him? What do you know from dealing with other players? What is his reputation as a coach that we don't see in the standings, we don't see, on the ice? What's going on behind the scenes with him as far as you know?
Yeah, so I've dealt with him from a media standpoint because I've done Islanders playoff games on the radio the last, couple of years. So I've done some interviews with him and talked to him a little bit. He's okay to deal with in that regard. Certainly not Derek King.
Few people are.
Exactly. I think Derek is so special in that regard and so generous with his time. And he just treats, Derek treats us the way he wants us to treat him. And that's just rare. Look, obviously Barry Trotz is a great coach. He's a tactician. He's a guy who's known for teaching teams how to play defense, tight defense. I think he probably overachieved with his Islanders teams. And then the problem, though, was this year, I think his voice grew tired in the locker room. And with guys like Barry, if you don't win quickly, you lose the room. And I actually right away texted, and I'm not going to give his name, but I'll describe the player and you guys can do it all you want. One of their very, very talented young defensemen. And he said, because I said to him, what happened? And he said, his voice lost the room this year. He really did. And when you're not winning and you have a coach that has that type of personality, you do see them lose the room.
So you're saying like a kind of a grinding, always on message, always serious, always intense.
And you're just kind of got that running commentary sometimes of negativity, and that can wear players down.
Interesting.
And again, when you're winning, nothing matters. You do what they say because we're winning and it's working. The minute you're not winning, becomes really difficult. And I had coaches like that. Bruce Cassidy's a great example of. He's one of the brightest hockey minds I ever played for. He is as good as I've ever been around at watching video, coming up with a game plan. But man, the way he kind of had that running commentary about players when you're on the ice and you come back to the bench and your D partner's like, you should have heard him while you were out there. Like, you know, you better win. And if you don't win, and he's won in Boston and he's survived, but you have to win when you're that type of coach, because if you don't, you know, you do lose, you know, your voice wears players down. Now, look, at the end of the day, he's a successful, proven track record of a coach. Do I know or think he's the right fit for here? I don't know him well enough, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I have the answer to if he should be the guy. He's obviously an interesting candidate. He's won a cup. He got, for a short period of time, Ovechkin to buy in. Not for a long period of time, but a short period. He got some buy-in from Matt Barzal. You know, is he going to get buy-in from Kaner for the next 5 years? Do you know what I mean? So you got to kind of look at these different things and wonder, how do personalities match? Where are we at? And who's the right fit? Is he going to be maybe the best coach based on resume available? Probably. But is he the right fit for the Blackhawks right now? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not saying yes and I'm not saying no, but you know, I'm sure people are up in arms today like, we need to hire Barry Trotz today or tomorrow, or this is a total failure. I completely disagree with that, because again, it's not about these guys at coach. They're all good.
Yeah.
You know, they all know different things, right? Some are motivators, some are tacticians, some are X's and O's guys, you know, some are button pushers. Who's going to be the right fit for what we're looking to do here? Develop young players. Okay, be patient with young players. Teach the young players details. Know when to pull a young player back. How do you get our older players to buy in and mentor a young player? That's the kind of guy we need here in Chicago. And so, again, I don't have the answer for you guys, but it's, you know, it's certainly on the top of everybody's mind.
Well, that insight is great. I mean, that's something that you can't look at a stat sheet and you can't look at a record book and say, okay, well, it doesn't show. And if you're talking about truly rebuilding, which is going to take at least 3 years to get into playoffs and maybe 5 to be a contender, that message may have worn thin by then. So we've talked a lot about, that's why we have sort of stumped for Derek King, because maybe he's your A to B, and then when you're ready to win, just like with Dennis Savard, in comes Joel Quenneville at the perfect time, and the dynasty is born, right? But I think even Q, towards the end, that message,
100%.
As the winning stopped, the message wore thin.
I had a football analogy, you know, growing up in Philadelphia, being an Eagles fan. You know, Andy Reid left the Eagles and went on to coach another team to success every single year.
Yeah.
But his message in Philly ran out. And ever since Andy Reid, it's been a carousel of coaches. He was there for like 12 or 13 years, and now he's been in Kansas City for 12 or 13 years because he continues to win. The minute Andy Reid doesn't win, his voice will get old. My cousin was a football player. He played for him on the Eagles. Played for him and Mike Tomlin. So very different. Way different styles, right? Way different. And so, look, I think that like you guys have a great example here of like how it went with Dennis Savard, and then Joel came in and right away. I think that like, you know, that was kind of the perfect scenario. You look at New York, right? I mean, David Quinn did all the hard work and the grunt work for the New York Rangers, and then, you know, the owner has a fit and starts firing everybody after they went 15 games over 500 on a 3-year rebuild, which they were able to accelerate because they had the first and second overall pick. They got Panarin in free agency. So like they were able to accelerate their 5-year plan to year 4, really. And look, I don't know if they're getting out of the first round this year because they're still young and they're they're not ready for big time there yet. They're just not. Capo Caco, Lafreniere, these guys are finally starting to show what they can do, but it takes time. And David Quinn did all the grunt work. He did all the detail work. He pulled guys in and out of the lineup. He had lunches with guys. He did the personal stuff with guys. And then, you know, they went to the next guy. Look, I think with Derek, I think that he would do a phenomenal job with our group. And I think that he would be a great option for us to have here in Chicago. But I wouldn't be so sure that he's not a guy who can win because he won as a player. And I think the cool thing with Derek, and he even told me this at the end of the season, he looks back and there's plenty of things he would do differently now.
Yeah.
He'd be harder on this guy. He changed this. This is a guy who's also learned the league. Who do I need to match? He was in the American League. That's a different bubble. It really is, So, I think he it's not to say he's not a coach who can win, because he won this year with a severely undermanned team at times. I mean, we were 1-9-1 or something to start the season.
Yeah.
I mean, so I think that you guys make good points there, and I think that you guys have been close enough to it to see what a guy like him brings to the table. But ultimately, I think Kyle and his team will have a good list of candidates, and I think people are going to come in and interview. I think a lot of it's going to have to do with who comes in and interviews and who comes in with a plan, and how am I going to get the best out of these young players? Because, rebuilding's the fancy word, but, what goes into the rebuild? Film, details, healthy scratching young players, hard lessons, hard losses, having leads and blowing them, not being ready to play. These are young themes that you see on teams that, is probably things we're about to all experience here being in this market.
Colby, it's been awesome, man. We really appreciate you stopping by. I swear to God, we could probably sit and talk for 3 or 4 more hours, but they need the studio space.
These hours fly by.
Yeah, they do. They do fly by.
Every time we go on, I can't believe it's been an hour.
It's awesome. So we're going to wrap up today's show. Want to remind everybody, tomorrow night we're on at 5:30 p.m. Why? It's very a random time. The NHL Draft Lottery is tomorrow. It will happen midway through our show. So if the Hawks get the first or second pick, we'll react in real time. They probably won't. But
otherwise, we'll tell you where the Columbus Blue Jackets will be drafted.
Exactly right. We're also going to talk to James Nichols, who covers the Islanders for the Fourth Period and the Eye on Isles podcast and blog, just to get a little scouting report on Barry Trotz as well, because we know you're all thinking about that. And look for later today, we're going to publish a piece on allchgo.com, our 3 opinions on Barry Trotz. So be looking for that as well. Want to remind everybody, we are, as always, presented by PointsBet. Use promo code CHGO when you sign up to get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000 from my partner Greg Boysen and for Colby Cohen. I'm Jay Zawaski. Thanks to our producer Kevin for running the board today. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the CHGO Blackhawks podcast.